Hey guys, tonight we're taking a one-way walk into a temple where the air is thick with smoke, the drums never stop, and your heartbeat is about to become someone else's property. You've been chosen not for a talent show, not for a scholarship, but to be offered up in blood to the sun itself. The obsidian blades are ready, the priests are humming, and the only way out is through. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're listening in the comments. I'm always curious who else is up this late. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're awoken just before midnight, not by a rooster, not by a servant, by silence. Dense, unnatural silence, the kind that fills the lungs like water. Someone is standing at your doorway. You already know who it is. Two figures step into your modest room. They wear cloaks dyed deep crimson, embroidered with gold thread that glimmers in the torchlight. Their faces are stern, unreadable. No words are exchanged. You rise barefoot. Your body knows the script even if your mind screams to improvise. Outside, a procession awaits. You're one of many. Bare shoulders, pale faces, a line of chosen ones snaking through the ancient streets of Tenochtitlan, the city that floats on a lake and pulses like a heart. Your city, your grave. The torches cast long shadows on the causeways as you walk. The lake water reflects your distorted reflection, flickering, stretched, almost unrecognizable. You pass homes with closed shutters, though a few brave eyes peek out just wide enough to glimpse the walking dead. Some toss flowers onto the path. Others whisper prayers. None intervene. You feel the drums before you hear them, a deep thudding rhythm carried through the stone and earth, like the heart of a giant stirring beneath the city. With every step, the sound grows louder, closer, more urgent. Templo Mayor appears through the mist, like a mountain carved by gods. Two temples crown its summit, one for Tlaloc, the god of rain, and one for Huitzilopochtli, the god of sun and war. Guess which one's hungry tonight? Historians still argue whether this midnight ritual walk was spiritual or psychological warfare designed to elevate the victim's soul or simply break their will. Maybe it's both. You ascend the steps slowly, not because you're allowed to take your time, but because each stair is nearly as tall as your knee, and they just keep coming. Your calves burn, your lungs strain. No one speaks, not even the guards. The quiet is louder than the drums now. At the top, the world opens up. The wind rushes past you like 1,000 voices whispering secrets in Nahuatl. Down below, the city glimmers with torchlight canals reflecting orange fire like veins of lava. For a moment, it's breathtaking. But then you see at the altar, stone. Slick with something dark and dry. There's a channel carved down its center, shallow, about the width of a wrist. You don't need a guidebook to guess what that's for. Behind it, 5 men stand in ceremonial garb, their faces painted white skulls over black skin, eyes rimmed in soot. The high priest wears a headdress of feathers so massive it moves independently in the breeze like it's trying to fly away from what it's about to do. You've heard the rumors. Everyone has. Some say the priests are trained from boyhood to cut without hesitation, that they practice on animals, that they meditate to silence their emotions. One tale says a priest once cried mid-sacrifice and was thrown off the temple for it. That's probably made up. Probably. You're led to a side chamber first, not the altar yet. Not quite. This is where they strip you of your clothes, then paint your skin a ghostly blue. They call it the color of sacrifice. You feel cold, exposed, not just physically, but cosmically, like you're now visible to forces that normally ignore the living. A priest offers you a sip of pulque, a fermented agave drink meant to dull your nerves. It tastes like sour milk and wet bread. You nearly gag. It doesn't help. The chamber smells of blood and incense. Copal resin burns in a clay bowl, curling smoke into the air like wandering spirits. The walls are decorated with murals, depictions of warriors slicing open chests of gods, devouring hearts. One shows a man smiling as he dies, arms outstretched, eyes blissful. You don't trust it. A fringe belief still passed around today suggests that those who resisted during the procession were replaced in secret, substituted with criminals or slaves to keep up appearances. It's romantic, sure. But you're still here. And now the waiting begins. Hours pass. Maybe days. Time melts without clocks. You're not alone, but no one talks. The others stare at walls, mutter prayers, or simply rock back and forth like metronomes trying to stay sane. You hear noises from above, heavy thuds, occasional cheers, once a gurgling moan that ends too quickly. They feed you maize cakes shaped like skulls and birds. Ritual food, symbolic, dry, tasteless. You chew each one like it might be your last. Spoiler, they all might be. The only warmth comes from a small window high in the wall. Through it, you see the stars. Orion's belt. They say is a sacred guide. It's meant to carry souls like yours into the heavens. You squint. Try to believe it. One night, if it is a night, they bring in dancers. Warriors in jaguar pelts and eagle feathers. They stomp and chant. You're meant to join in. You do, awkwardly. Like a kid at a birthday party who doesn't know the moves. But no one laughs. They cheer, they encourage, and it's worse than scorn. A man beside you collapses during the dance. Exhaustion, fear doesn't matter. 2 priests carry him out and he doesn't come back. You're told he was called early. That's supposed to be a good thing. They dress you again, this time in fine cotton dyed red. You wear a necklace of paper and feathers. Your ankles are painted black. Each gesture has meaning. You're now officially a noble offering, not just a body, a gift. The priests tell you nothing, not when, not how. But eventually one morning, or is it dusk, they come. They beckon, it's time. And just like that, the procession begins again. But this time it ends at the top. You were always different, not because you were smarter or braver or more devout. No, your difference came marked in whispers and rituals, in the way elders looked at you, during ceremonies like someone had already decided you wouldn't grow old. They said you were touched by the gods. Born under a rare celestial alignment, Venus shimmering in the morning sky, while Tlaloc's temple drums thundered in the background. Your birth was seen as an omen, and not the cozy kind involving good harvests and sweet corn. No, this omen came with feathers, blood, and an expiration date. From your earliest memories, there were signs. You never walked anywhere without someone pressing a flower into your palm, or whispering blessings as if to preempt your eventual use. At festivals, you weren't allowed to dance with the others. Instead, you watched from behind painted cloth, always in white, always barefoot, like a ghost previewing your own afterlife. Your family didn't act like you were doomed, but they also didn't pretend you weren't. Your mother wept openly the night a priest tied a red thread around your wrist during the rain festival, saying it marked the beginning of your service. You were 5, and service didn't mean what it meant for others. Historians still argue whether these chosen ones, often young boys or girls, were truly honored, or if this was simply a tidy way for the nobility to curry favor with the priesthood. After all, no one volunteers their child for a sacrifice unless they expect spiritual returns, or perhaps tax breaks. Maybe both. At age 7, you were brought to the Kalmakak, the temple school reserved for future priests and nobles. Most kids learn to read codices, perform rituals fast with dignity. You, however, had a curriculum built around death. You were taught the sacred names of gods Tezcatlipoca, with his smoking obsidian mirror, Xipe-Totec, who wore flayed human skin like a second outfit, Huitzilopochtli, who needed hearts the way others need water. Your instructors said speaking their names aloud could bless your tongue or burn your spirit from the inside. You practiced sitting still for hours, not blinking, not flinching. A test, they said, to prepare for the day your blood would become a sermon. Sometimes they'd paint your body with different patterns to see how you'd look as an offering. One day you were striped like a tiger. Another day you were painted entirely black and left in a cold room for hours while smoke filled your lungs. This is what the god will see, one priest said. Let him be pleased. There's a fringe theory whispered among modern scholars that children marked early were fed special diets to purify their flesh. You remember the blandness of your meals. No chili, no salt, just maize and water. Even your blood had to be clean, apparently. Like wine for the gods, but with more iron. Every year on the same date, you were taken to the top of the temple. Not for sacrifice yet, but to see, to feel the wind, to look out over the city and feel how far the fall would be. A spiritual preview of your exit route. By age 10, you'd memorized more hymns than your father had teeth. You could recite the entire migration myth of the Mexica without stumbling. You knew the origin of Huitzilopochtli, how he was born fully armed, and how he sliced his sister into pieces before she could kill their mother. The message family loyalty only goes so far. Still, the real horror wasn't in the training. It was in the waiting, because no one told you when. One day you'd be weaving baskets or praying by a fountain, and someone would whisper, "Soon." Sometimes they said it lovingly, like a lullaby. Other times like a death sentence. Each soon felt heavier than the last. Then came the calendar stone. Every few moons, the priests consulted the Tonopahwali, the sacred 260-day calendar that decided everything from farming to which direction your soul would take post-mortem. And one day, your name appeared under a very specific glyph flint knife. That's when things shifted. Your friends stopped making eye contact. Your teachers bowed deeper when they saw you. You were now a Techiptla, a human embodiment of a god chosen to be their earthly form before becoming their cosmic fuel. It's sort of like being elected prom royalty, but at the end everyone claps while your chest is opened like a fruit bowl. There was one kid before you, a Kolhua. You remember him because he had a laugh that could break stone. When his time came, he was silent, completely still as they led him away. They say he died without flinching, but you saw his mother afterward. She never spoke again. To help you adjust, the priests allowed you certain luxuries, fine cotton robes, a feathered headdress, even music played just for you at dusk. For a moment you were important, revered, pampered, but you never got to enjoy it, not really, because every luxury came with a silent expiration date. Every soft pillow reminded you it would be your deathbed. Every compliment felt like a goodbye in disguise. There's even a carved inscription on a temple wall that reads, "The gods do not ask, they take." It's unclear whether that was a priest's warning or a victim's final joke. A few nights before your final walk, they held a celebration just for you. Dancers performed with obsidian mirrors. The people sang songs naming you as a living god. Children placed flower petals at your feet. You smiled through it. You even laughed. But deep inside, your stomach twisted into knots tighter than a priest's sash. This wasn't celebration. It was the world's most elaborate countdown. One elder whispered to you after the ceremony, "You are the bridge between the earth and sky." Nice metaphor. Too bad bridges get stepped on. As the days ticked by, sleep became rare. Not because of nightmares, those were old news, but because of silence. The quiet that stretched too long. The kind where even your heartbeat starts to sound like a drum announcing your approach. The final sign came subtly. One morning, you were led into a room you'd never entered before. Inside was a single obsidian mirror. No teachers, no priests, just your reflection. You stared for what felt like hours, and in the dark shimmer of that glass, you didn't see a child anymore, or a god, or even yourself. You saw an ending. You stand at the base of the Templo Mayor again, only this time, it's not part of a rehearsal, or a visit, or one of those priest-led. Someday, you'll be here tours. Nope. This time, you're the main attraction. And the temple. It looks bigger than ever, taller, hungrier. The sky above Tenochtitlan is still dark, but not for long. The stars are fading, giving way to the indigo blush of pre-dawn. The timing is deliberate. Ritual sacrifice must occur just before sunrise, because the sun, ever the diva, demands fuel to rise. And guess who's on the menu? Around you, other chosen ones shuffle forward. Some are silent, some trembling, one is crying softly. No one's mocking him. No one's pretending to be brave anymore. There's a raw honesty and shared doom. You all know what's coming, and no amount of feathered ceremony can make it feel poetic. Drums begin again. Low, steady, familiar now. Like an old friend who only shows up when something terrible is about to happen. As you begin to climb, the enormity of the stairs becomes real. Each step feels taller than the last. Not metaphorically, literally. The slope is intentionally brutal, a sacred effort meant to symbolize your ascent into the heavens. Or possibly just a cruel test to see if you'll collapse before reaching the top. Either way, your legs burn, your breath shortens, and the only view is forward. Mainstream historians note that Templo Mayor's dual temple layout was a symbolic balance, rain and war, Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli. But most sacrifices, including yours, take place at Huitzilopochtli's temple, the one that requires blood to guarantee the sun's daily return. A bit dramatic, sure, but hey, cosmic schedules are strict. As you ascend, the scent hits you first. Not the incense that's still there wafting like sweet fog from bowls of burning copal, but something underneath it. Metallic, tangy, old. It's blood. It clings to the stone steps soaked into centuries of sacrifice. The temple may be clean on the outside, but its bones are dyed crimson. Your foot slips slightly on something wet. You don't look down. You know better. Around halfway up, you start to hear the chants. They're soft at first, drifting from the summit, but soon they grow louder, organized, rhythmic pulsing. The crowd below joins in, and suddenly your name is part of a drumbeat echoed by thousands. You reach the top, finally, panting, legs shaking, And then you see it. The altar, flat stone, weathered, grooved from use. No cushions, no illusions. It sits beneath a towering idol of Huitzilopochtli whose obsidian eyes gleam with what you swear is amusement. His tongue is a blade, his heart already full, but apparently not full enough. The priests wait in formation, 5 of them each with a role like members of a particularly morbid boy band. One greets you, another checks your bindings, one oils the blade, one stands behind the altar, and the 5th, he chants, loud, unbroken, like a living metronome for death. They paint your chest again, this time with a sun symbol. It's done with red dye, but you suspect that part won't stay symbolic for long. Fringe accounts suggest some victims were told they'd be reborn as stars, their names written across the sky. A lovely sentiment. You'd appreciate it more if the view didn't involve vultures circling above. They guide you to the altar. Not forcefully, just firmly. Like a waiter pulling out a chair you'll never rise from again. You lie down. The stone is cold against your back. Your arms are pulled outward, spread like wings. 2 priests hold your wrists. 2 more pin your legs. Their grips are strong, not angry, not cruel, just practiced. The way a butcher handles a familiar animal. You stare up into the morning sky. A single cloud drifts overhead. You imagine it's shaped like something, maybe a jaguar, maybe nothing. The wind cools your skin, and for a moment you wonder if this is what birds feel before they dive. The high priest steps forward now. You've seen him before from afar, a celebrity of sorts. He raises his hands, chants something in Nahuatl that you barely catch, and lifts the obsidian blade. This is the Tecpotl, a blade crafted for exactly one purpose. Its edge is obsidian, sharper than steel, fragile but devastating. Historians agree it could slice through skin and muscle with surgical precision, but there's debate about how effective it was on bone. Some argue additional tools were used. Others insist the priests were simply that good. You're about to find out who's right. The moment before the blade descends feels frozen, not slow, just quiet. Like the air itself holds its breath. You lock eyes with the sky. You think of your family. You wonder if your heart will beat one last time or if it's already stopped, just waiting for permission to leave. Then he plunges the blade downward, and the world tilts. A hot flash erupts across your chest, sharp, burning, total. Not just pain, change. Like something fundamental inside you has been rearranged. There's a theory still debated that victims remained conscious for up to 30 seconds after their hearts were removed. Whether it's true or not, you don't know. Because your vision narrows. Your hearing fades. But you feel something. A pull. The high priest lifts your heart high above red and pulsing, offering it to the rising sun, now peeking over the horizon. The crowd below roars, not in cruelty, but in awe, as if your final breath just bought them another day. You don't scream. Your mouth opens, but no sound comes. Your last sensation is warmth, strange warmth, not of blood, but of sunlight on your face. Then blackness, not empty, just quiet. But the ritual isn't over. Not yet. Your body, now limp and blood-slicked, is lifted from the altar with the same practiced reverence as before. One priest drapes a ceremonial cloth over your chest. Not for modesty, just symbolism. You're still sacred, even in death. Then they carry you to the edge of the temple. Not to bury, not to cremate, to drop. There's a chute carved into the side of the Templo Mayor, designed centuries ago, slanted, smooth, and ceremonial. Your body is laid upon it, then given a gentle push. Gravity does the rest. You tumble. Stone rushes past. Wind howls. Your body, once celebrated, now becomes part of the ritual's closure. You land in a heap at the base among others who came before. And for the crowd, this is the moment of catharsis. They don't cry. They cheer. Children throw flowers. The city's heartbeat resets, and high above, the sun continues to rise, bathed in your warmth. The world doesn't pause when you die. The drums don't stop. The wind doesn't hesitate. The crowd doesn't scatter in stunned silence. No, they surge forward, curious, reverent, energized, because your body, still warm, still glistening with blood and paint, has now become something else entirely. A relic. Priests gather around where you've landed, adjusting your limbs, unwrapping the cloth from your chest. You're inspected like a prized cut of meat, and in a way that's exactly what you are. You remember that stone chute, the one they didn't tell you about during your training. It's not just practical, it's symbolic. It delivers your body back to the earth, the city, the people. The divine cycle isn't complete until flesh touches stone and blood seeps into the sacred ground. Now comes the second part of the ritual, the part you were never taught in the Kalmakak. There's a fringe belief among modern researchers that the Aztecs didn't just see sacrifice as an offering, but as a transformation. Once the heart was gone, the body wasn't a person anymore. It was divine material, like a temple statue or a sacred codex. It could be used, distributed, shared without the emotional weight modern cultures would attach to that idea. Your body is lifted again. It's not hurried. There's choreography to it. 2 priests carry you by the arms, 2 by the legs. They chant softly, honoring your passage. And yet there's a briskness to the moment too, because you're not the only one. Another body waits on the chute behind you. A line is forming. You're brought to a side chamber near the base of the temple, hidden from the public. This is where the honored dead are processed. And here's where it gets culinary. The high priest doesn't follow. He's done his part. Instead, lower-tier priests and select nobles take over. They're dressed more modestly, less feathers, more aprons. Yes, aprons. Not for ritual purity, but to avoid stains. On the floor sits a wide obsidian slab, flat polished and dark as night. They lay you on it gently. Then, with tools as ritualistic as they are practical, they begin the next phase. Mainstream history agrees that the Aztecs practiced ritual cannibalism in very specific contexts. Human flesh wasn't street food. It was reserved for sacred feasts for nobles and priests, consumed in tightly controlled ceremonies. It wasn't about taste. It was about power, taking the divine into the body. But even among scholars, there's debate about how extensive this practice really was. Some argue it was symbolic, limited to slivers of meat consumed with maize cakes. Others point to bones discovered in noble homes, cooked cut, and clearly not just for decoration. You're cut with precision. The legs first. The thighs especially are considered the most desirable. Strong, meaty, seen as potent with divine energy. Your arms follow. Internal organs are removed, not discarded, but offered separately to other deities. The liver might go to Tlaloc, the lungs to Tezcatlipoca. The rest, well, that depends on who's in the mood for stew. You're not the only one in the room. Several bodies lie nearby, all in various stages of ritual division. It's not gruesome in the way you'd expect. There's no shouting, no chaos. Just method, reverence, focus. like monks preparing a sacred meal. And that's what it is. Outside the chamber, a group of elite guests has gathered. Dressed in dyed cotton feathered cloaks and gold jewelry, they await the arrival of Tonakayotl, the flesh of the people. A word with two meanings, one literal, one divine. They sit cross-legged on mats, surrounded by copal smoke, flanked by dancers and singers. The atmosphere is festive. Not in a birthday cake kind of way, more like a Thanksgiving dinner with gods in attendance. The meat arrives in clay bowls roasted with chilies and herbs, served with tortillas made from amaranth and maize. Your left thigh is placed before a high-ranking warrior. He bows before tasting it, not in sarcasm, in gratitude. He eats slowly, mindfully. As he chews, a priest recites your name, your lineage, and the god you were given to. Everyone listens. Everyone nods. It's not morbid. It's not grotesque. It's sacred. But let's not pretend it's all clean and noble. One nobleman dips a tortilla into the broth and sighs. Tender. Must have been a good year. A servant laughs quietly. Sacred or not, meat is meat, and hunger is still hunger. There's a fringe tale, almost certainly apocryphal, that once during a massive festival, too many sacrifices were performed too quickly. The meat began to spoil. Instead of discarding it, the priests declared it aged in holiness. It was served anyway. Divine food poisoning followed. Probably not true. But then again, you've seen weirder things. After the feast, your bones are not discarded. They're too important. Some are cleaned and stored in temple caches. Others are made into flutes, yes, real flutes used in future ceremonies. There are reports of tibia bones fashioned into instruments that produce eerie, hollow tones during death rites. Your voice, in a way, will sing forever. And then there's your skull. It won't be buried, or burned, or hidden away in some priest's closet. No, it's going public. Your skull is cleaned carefully, boiled, stripped, polished, then drilled with two small holes on either side just above the jaw. Through these, a thin wooden rod is inserted, and the whole thing is slotted onto a rack outside the temple. The Tsompantli, a wall of skulls. Not metaphorical, literal. A great scaffold covered in human heads grinning toward the city like permanent spectators. Some estimates say there were thousands at one time. Rows and rows, tier upon tier, a chilling reminder that the gods are fed daily. Historians still argue whether the Tzompantli was purely religious or also political, part warning, part worship. Did it say rejoice in the gods? Or stay in line? Either way, your place is secured. Front row. Your empty sockets look out across the plaza. You're no longer afraid. You can't be. Your body's done. Your spirit, they say, now travels with the sun, fighting darkness on its journey across the sky. That's the official story. But part of you lingers here. In the square. In the wall. In the eyes of children walking past, who glance up and whisper, "That one looks new." You're not alone on that skull rack. As the sun climbs higher and Tenochtitlan comes alive with market's laughter and distant drum beats, more faces join you on the Tzompantli. Some are older, bone-weathered teeth, missing sockets, eaten by time. Others are fresh like yours. Their clean ivory still streaked faintly with pigment and blood. You are all equal here, warriors, captives, children, nobles. The sun doesn't play favorites, and neither do the gods. You stare eternally out toward the main plaza. Down below, life bustles like nothing happened. Merchants hawk goods. Children splash in fountains. Musicians strum instruments made from the bones of people like you. No one averts their eyes from the skull wall. It's part of the landscape. Decorative, devotional. Decorative and devotional, which in Aztec logic makes perfect sense. You're not haunting the place, not in the spooky ghost sense. But your presence is part of the temple's rhythm now. A constant silent note in the symphony of belief. You're an icon, literally. The Tzompantli isn't hidden or tucked away. It's mounted along a primary causeway, proudly positioned near the great temple, so pilgrims and citizens alike can admire the craftsmanship, feel the sacred presence, and remember the price of daylight. But your part in this ritual tableau actually started days earlier in the waiting chamber. Remember that space, stone walls, low light, the scent of dried herbs and sweat, the constant drip of water from a cracked ceiling. That's where you began your final stretch alongside others chosen like you. The quiet room with its strange blend of devotion and dread. Back then, you all shared glances like prisoners on the eve of something. You even spoke once to a girl named Malinali. She was younger than you, maybe 12, with wide eyes and a soft voice. She told you she dreamed of fire and feathers. She said she'd seen her heart in the stars. You didn't know whether to comfort her or be afraid of her. She went before you. You heard her name called, saw the flicker of torchlight as they took her through the painted door. You didn't see her again, but you saw her skull added to the rack 2 days later, fourth from the right, jaw still intact. There's a strange comfort in seeing her again. But now new faces arrive. Today, a man named Izel is brought up. He's different, older. He doesn't cry or tremble. He glares at the priests like they're wasting his time. Whispers say he was a captured enemy general, a warrior taken alive in battle, which, as you know, is kind of a double-edged honor. In Aztec warfare, the goal wasn't to kill your enemy, it was to capture them. Death on the battlefield was wasteful. A live captive could be sacrificed, and that earned you spiritual points way faster. Think of it like celestial brownie points. Izel is led up the temple with full ceremony. The people chant, warriors beat their shields. His execution is theatrical, aggressive, and public. No waiting room for him, no incense-filled chamber, just a straight march to the blade. He dies yelling the name of his own god. And hours later, his skull ends up near yours. You can almost hear his voice again, mocking even in death. You notice something curious. The skulls are arranged deliberately, not random. Warriors go here, nobles there. Children near the base, closer to the ground. And above all, in the center, are the rarest ones, the skulls of mock gods. Those poor souls. You knew about them, Techiptlas dressed as gods during festivals paraded around the city, fed delicacies draped in gold, only to be killed in ways themed to the god they portrayed. It's theatrical murder, basically. And those guys, they don't even get the quick, clean blade. Oh no, they might be flayed alive, shot with arrows, or drowned, whatever their deity prefers. You remember one in particular, the man who portrayed Xipe Totec last year. He wore a full suit of human skin, stitched and cured, and walked the city for weeks like a walking scarecrow. The children clapped when he passed. Adults threw petals. Then on the final day, he was tied to a stone and flayed by the high priest himself. They say his screams echoed all the way to the canal. His skull sits at the center now, polished, proud, a symbol of how far a man will go for religion, or fame, or survival. Some fringe researchers argue that the Tzompantli wasn't just for ritual display, it was also used to intimidate enemies and awe allies, like the ultimate spiritual flex. You want your city blessed. Look how many hearts we've offered. You want your crops to grow. We've got enough skulls to build a fence around the marketplace. And it worked. Delegations from nearby city-states would visit the capital and immediately be shown the rack. Look at our faith, the priests would say. Look at our power. It's hard to argue with several thousand grinning reminders. The sun moves overhead. Its light shifts, casting long shadows of the skulls onto the ground. Birds perch on the top row, oblivious to the symbolism. Below, a new group of pilgrims arrives. They kneel whispering prayers. Some press flowers to the base. One boy points at your skull and says, "That one's smiling." You weren't, but maybe now you are. The city keeps moving. Life doesn't pause for the dead, not even the ritually honored ones. But still, you've become part of something. A fixture, a warning, a memory made bone. And as the day ends and the drums shift back to their nighttime rhythm, you feel the wind sweep through the temple plaza. It stirs the feathers on banners, rustles the petals, and passes through your empty sockets like a whisper. You don't speak, but you're still heard. And now the God you died for. It's kind of awkward, really, because he isn't your God. Not the one your family whispered to before meals, not the gentle one who governed rain or maize. No, the one you were handed to was the sharp-toothed, ever-thirsty war god of the rising sun, Huitzilopochtli. Even his name feels like a weapon, doesn't it? The Aztecs believed the sun was constantly fighting a cosmic battle. Every dawn wasn't guaranteed, it had to be earned, fed, reignited. And who better to fuel that fight than you? There's something weird about being sacrificed to a god who wouldn't even recognize your prayers. Huitzilopochtli didn't deal in kindness. He didn't bless your crops or soothe your children's fevers. He wanted one thing, and he wanted it daily hearts. The myths say he was born mid-battle, that his mother Coatlicue became pregnant when a ball of feathers fell into her lap. Her children, 400 of them, were so offended they tried to kill her. But Huitzilopochtli burst from her womb, fully grown, fully armored, and immediately decapitated his sister and scattered his brothers across the sky. You can't really call him warm and fuzzy. Historians still argue whether Huitzilopochtli's cult became dominant because of spiritual belief or because his priests had the most political clout. Maybe both. One fringe theory says his temple was rebuilt every 52 years, not just for religious reasons, but to reassert political dominance. Like saying, hey, we're still the top god in town. Look at our fresh paint job. You always knew about him growing up. His temple loomed over the city, his statues glared down from processions. But he never felt close. He was the god of warriors, not weavers, of conquests, not kitchens. And yet here you are, one more heart for his collection. They painted you blue because that was his color. They shaved your head because he wore eagle feathers and wanted clarity of face. You weren't honored to look like him, you were required. Ironically, many sacrificed to him weren't soldiers at all. Sure, captured warriors were high-value offerings. But when the wars dried up, priests had to get creative. Children, criminals, slaves, or in your case, ritual chosen ones, anyone could become a gift. One fringe account found scratched into an obsidian mirror base suggests Huitzilopochtli once demanded 20,000 hearts in a single month. Is it true? No one can say. But in a culture where metaphor and myth breathe side by side, the line between exaggeration and belief gets very blurry. Sometimes the sacrifices weren't enough. That's when the priests took to mock wars, staged battles designed to produce captives. Real weapons, real blood, all just to restock the god's pantry. Kind of puts the phrase reenactment in a whole new category. Even the calendar bowed to Huitzilopochtli. His month Panketsalistli was filled with feasts, dances, and yes, rampant sacrifice. Leading up to the solstice offerings increased in frequency and spectacle. It was believed the sun grew weaker in winter, and his hunger grew with it. Your timing, it seems, was less about you and more about him needing fuel. And the rites. Oh, the rites. They didn't just march you up, slice you open, and toss you aside. No. You were processed, transformed. Before you reached the altar, your identity had already been peeled away, layer by layer, until all that remained was a vessel. You were never really you. You were his. Even the crowd didn't cheer for you. They cheered for the God inside you, or the one you were about to appease. The logic was simple. If the God demanded blood and didn't get it, the sun would stall, crops would die, and the fifth age would collapse into darkness. Fifth age. Oh yes, that's where things get cosmically complicated. Aztec mythology teaches that we're living in the fifth iteration of the world. The previous four were destroyed by jaguars, floods, winds, and fire. This fifth sun, the current one, only exists because the gods sacrificed themselves at the beginning of time. Their blood set the sun in motion, which means every human sacrifice is a thank you card, a way to keep the world spinning in gratitude. But here's the twisted irony: the sun god you're sacrificed to wasn't one of those original creators. He came later. And yet he demands more fuel than any of them. Power politics, even in divine circles. There's something stinctly bureaucratic about the whole system. Sacrifice quotas, feast schedules, ranks of victims based on political value. It wasn't chaos, it was a machine. And you were one of the cogs. At one point in your training, a priest leaned close and said, "The sun will rise whether you die or not, but better to be the reason it does." You tried to believe that. You tried to believe you were special, that your blood would do something no other blood had done, that you would be remembered. And maybe in a way, you are your skull up on the Tzompantli, your bones turned to instruments, your name murmured during mealtime prayers. But here's the thing they don't tell you after you die. Huitzilopochtli doesn't whisper in your ear. He doesn't greet you in the afterlife. He doesn't thank you. There's no divine handshake, no radiant approval, because he is not your God. And yet, he was your end. The morning after your sacrifice, the city celebrates. Children wear paper sun masks. Dancers perform the story of Huitzilopochtli's birth, some even playing the doomed siblings who get chased off the stage by a boy in golden feathers wielding a painted spear. Vendors sell maize cakes shaped like hearts. Someone even says that was a good sacrifice. The sun came up faster today. You'd probably roll your eyes if you had any. Still, the people believe. They always will. Because belief is powerful. It makes the impossible feel noble. It turns a dying child into a hero, a terrifying death into a sacred duty, and a hungry war god into a cosmic savior. So no, Huitzilopochtli wasn't your god, but he's the reason the sun touches your skull this morning. And that's something. There's a celebration happening just below your skull rack. And it's festive. Like disturbingly festive. Colorful banners flutter in the breeze, painted paper streamers shaped like hummingbirds and serpents all dancing midair like they're in on some cosmic joke. Flutes and drums echo down the temple steps, mixing with the metallic clang of dancers' ankle bells. Flowers are everywhere, scattered across the plaza, in bursts of marigold, and crushed under the feet of ecstatic crowds. And in the center of it all, you. Well, not you anymore. You're up here on the Tzompantli, grinning your eternal grin. But your likeness, your symbol, has been transformed into the centerpiece of a city-wide party that doesn't even pretend to be solemn. You see, the Aztecs didn't just mourn the sacrificial victims. They didn't whisper condolences or lower flags to half-mast. No, they celebrated you, paraded you, turned your imminent doom into a festival with snacks and singing. It's called the Tlakaksipahualistli, the Feast of the Flayed. And yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. During this month-long festival, a man chosen to represent the god Saipe Totek, the Flayed One, is paraded through the streets dressed in the skin, a sacrifice. Not metaphorically, literally. Like a second outfit stitched from someone who looked a lot like you a few days earlier. And everyone cheers. Because this isn't seen as horrifying. It's seen as renewal, a death that brings rebirth. Just like shedding a snakeskin or peeling away the husk of maize. The gods wear flesh not to desecrate, but to refresh, allegedly. This is where things get weirder. You, along with others who died this cycle, are portrayed not as martyrs, but as joyful offerings. The victims, like you, are reimagined in the public mind as dancing figures clapping to flute music, smiling on their way up the temple steps. There's even a rumor, and yes, historians still debate this, that people painted murals of sacrifice victims smiling, claiming it was the highest expression of love for the gods. You're now part of a storybook narrative where fear doesn't exist, only honor. Children are told, if you're chosen, you must smile like the honored ones did, like you did. Except, you didn't. The festival doesn't stop at parades. There's mock combat in the main plaza, a gladiatorial-style battle where a bound warrior, usually a captive from a rival city, is given a feathered club and forced to fight fully armed opponents. He loses, on purpose. And when he falls, the crowd roars in delight. Sometimes that warrior is promised freedom if he survives all his opponents, a chance at redemption. Spoiler alert, no one survives. The celebration swells into the night. Fire dancers leap through bonfires. Nobles hold banquets with maize beer-grilled fish and the occasional sacred stew. You already know what's in that. People laugh. They shout. They toast to the gods and to the newly sacrificed. To you. And just to sprinkle a little extra weirdness on top, remember how they paraded mock gods around. You probably saw one as a child, a man dressed as Tezcatlipoca walking the city. His face always painted black, his steps always measured. He was treated like royalty for a full year, gave blessings, received gifts, slept on cushions, ate meals so perfect you'd weep. And then on the final day, he walked up the temple steps, broke his flutes, and let the priests kill him without a word. You used to wonder why he didn't run, now you know. Because for a year he was a god, adored, elevated, a living deity walking through a city that bowed at his feet. Was the death worth it? That depends on what you think of the year he got. But not everyone gets a year. Some get a week, or a day, or in your case, just enough time to be painted blue and fed maize cakes shaped like skulls. Still, everyone plays a part. The high-ranking warrior who captured you in battle. He's at the festival now, honored by the city, his name added to the temple records. He's given gifts, titles, a better position in the military. Your death made him more powerful. He raises a drink to the gods. And to you, probably. Though he doesn't remember your name. Your family. They're not here. In fact, they've likely been taken to a special ceremony elsewhere, part mourning, part cleansing. Parents of the sacrificed are honored but also kept at arm's length. Too much grief disrupts the festival mood. They say some parents sing after the death. Others go silent forever. A few become priests themselves, dedicating the rest of their lives to serving the gods who took their child. Stockholm Syndrome, but with feathered headdresses. There's a lesser-known fringe belief passed down in Nahuatl whispers that the souls of the sacrificed attend the festival unseen, dancing among the crowd in spirit form. Some say shadows move strangely near the temple stairs. Others claim to hear laughter where no one stands. You wonder what kind of dance you'd do. The party lasts all night. By morning, the plaza is a mess of wilted flowers, extinguished torches, and sleeping bodies. The Tzompantli casts a long shadow over it all. As dawn breaks, priests begin sweeping the steps again, readying them for the next round. Because the sun isn't satisfied with one heart, or 10, or 100. It always wants more, and the people they'll give it. With song, with ceremony, with smiles that don't always reach their eyes. Because in Tenochtitlan, sacrifice isn't a tragedy, it's a necessity wrapped in a party. You're part of the celebration now, forever. You know that feeling when someone walks into the room holding something sharp, and they're smiling, and you're not sure if the smile means this'll be quick or this'll be memorable. That's the vibe when you first see the Tecpotl, the ritual obsidian blade used to open the chest. The blade isn't large. It's not some over-the-top sword or a bronze cleaver like you might expect from a sacrificial society. No, it's small, elegant, sharp enough to slice through flesh like it's paper, crafted from volcanic glass, black as night, and honed to a microscopic edge. One stroke from this thing, it's cleaner than a surgeon's scalpel. That is, if the person wielding it knows what they're doing. And in your case, they really do. The man holding it is called the Tlena, or fire priest, though in this context he's the one chosen to do the cutting. You've seen him from afar before, tall, expressionless, wrapped in jaguar skin with his face painted like a skull. Up close, he's less mystic and more methodical. Not cruel, not kind, just focused. And that's what makes it worse. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about Aztec sacrifice: it wasn't chaotic. It wasn't wild or improvised or clumsy. It was professional, organized, efficient, almost clinical. You're placed on the altar, back pressed against sun-warmed stone. 4 men, 1 for each limb, hold you down because tradition dictates it must be 4. Not 3, not 5. 4 corners, 4 winds, 4 directions of the world. It's symbolic, sure, but also really effective for restraining terrified humans. You feel each hand pressed down. No cruelty in their grip, just certainty. And then he approaches. The Tecpotl glints in the sun. It doesn't shimmer. It doesn't sparkle. It glares. The edge looks uneven, up close, almost chipped. That's because obsidian isn't shaped like metal, it's fractured. Razor sharp, yes, but also fragile. You imagine it could snap inside you. You imagine a lot of things, actually. Fringe scholars claim the Tecpotl wasn't always used for sacrifice. Some say it started as a battlefield tool, others believe it was strictly ceremonial. What they agree on is this: it was sacred, and it didn't need to be big to terrify someone, especially when it's being aimed directly at your chest. The priest doesn't shout, doesn't chant, just leans in, sets the blade gently on your sternum, and then pushes. Pain is immediate, but oddly distant. Like your body understands what's happening, but your brain refuses to process it all at once. You're flooded with heat pressure, something wet running down your ribs, and above it all, your mind screams, "This is real. This is happening." I'm not waking up. And then you do wake up if you ever left. Because for the next few seconds, or is it minutes, you're stuck in a place of overwhelming now. Your vision narrows. You don't feel the stone anymore. The faces around you blur, but one thing stays sharp in your mind. The sound of the blade scraping against bone. Historians still argue about this moment. Some say the priests could remove a heart in under 15 seconds. Others believe the process took longer, that multiple cuts were made to sever the ribs and reach the heart without breaking the bones. There's a fringe theory that the Tlanamakak trained on cadavers to practice the perfect motion, efficient, respectful, sacred. In your case, the motion is practiced. The priest finds the space between ribs, separates the cartilage, slips the blade beneath. Then, with a single upward motion, he opens your chest cavity. And just like that, your heart is in his hand. He raises it high. The sun has just crested the horizon, spilling golden light across the temple. The crowd roars, not with bloodlust, but with reverence. You are not a person anymore. You are a prayer fulfilled. Your heart steams in the morning air. The priest turns to face Huitzilopochtli's statue and offers the heart upward. The god doesn't move, of course, but something does. The drums change beat. The wind shifts. Birds lift from the nearby trees in sudden flight. Some call it coincidence. Others call it proof. Then the priest places your heart in a special bowl, an obsidian quoshikali carved with jaguars and eagles. This is where the hearts of the sacrificed are temporarily stored before being burned or buried, depending on the ritual calendar. Your chest is still open, your blood pooling along the altar's carved channels. You don't know if you're aware of this or if awareness has already gone. But the body remembers. It always remembers. And what about the crowd? They're still cheering. A few nobles murmur prayers. A boy clutches a toy figure of Huitzilopochtli and waves it in your direction. A woman wipes her eyes not from sadness but from awe. One merchant mutters, "Good technique this time." Another replies, "Yes, that was clean," as if rating a performance. And in a way, they are. Sacrifice was performance, not just for the gods, but for the people. It had to be seen. It had to be witnessed. Because what is faith without proof, and what is a society that doesn't constantly remind itself what happens when the gods go hungry? A modern scholar once called Aztec sacrifice the theater of cosmic obligation. A mouthful, sure, but accurate. You were the lead actor in today's production. And like all performances, it ends with applause. The priests lift your body, chest still open, blood still warm, and carry you down from the altar. The next victim waits quietly behind a carved pillar, his eyes wide, his skin pale. He watches you pass and knows the script by heart. He's memorized the lines, rehearsed the steps. You were just the first scene. He's next. You're no longer there to feel it, but 4 men carry you like you're still something sacred. Because technically you are. Your body is limp, drained. Yet it's handled with care, laid across a bed of woven reeds at the edge of the temple's summit. But that's only temporary. Because here's the part nobody tells the tourists. The temple has a secret exit. It's called the Huit Sompanko chute, steep, smooth stone carved into the side of Templo Mayor. It isn't decorative. It isn't ceremonial. It's practical. After the sacrifice, once your heart is removed, your body is well discarded. Not tossed like garbage. Lowered, slid, delivered. You become part of a system that keeps moving, always moving, like a well-oiled divine machine. You're not the first to ride the chute, not by centuries. There are grooves worn into the stone from the passage of thousands of bodies. They say the slope was angled perfectly to allow gravity to do the work, no priest needing to risk a strained back hauling bodies down that treacherous staircase. Instead, they let you roll, and so down you go, shoulders bumping the sides, blood trailing behind, legs tangling, arms flailing in a last graceless imitation of life. When you land, it's not gentle. You hit the base with a solid thud, settling awkwardly in a heap beside the others. If your bones weren't broken before, they probably are now. But of course, you don't notice. A team of temple attendants is already waiting. They don't flinch. They've done this dozens of times today alone. They don't stop to ask who you were or what you meant to anyone. Their job isn't mourning, it's management. You're one of many today. Tomorrow will be worse. A festival is approaching. The quotas must be met. And here's the unsettling part: you're not at your final stop yet. First, your body is cleaned. Yes, cleaned. Not out of respect, but for hygiene and ritual precision. The attendants take cloths soaked in herbal water, some mix of Maggi basil and ash, and scrub the blood from your face and limbs. They cut away the remaining ceremonial garb, the feathers, the red-dyed cotton, the paper jewelry. All of it is stripped and placed aside. Then they wash your chest, not to undo what's been done, but to make the next phase neater. Because now comes the part that makes most modern stomachs turn. Your body will be prepared for ritual butchering. Fringe accounts from early colonial scribes, biased, yes, but sometimes disturbingly detailed, speak of Kalmakak kitchens where sacrificial bodies were distributed and cooked for elite consumption. Not out of cannibalistic frenzy, not from desperation, but from divine duty. You are about to be portioned. A priest steps forward. He's not dressed in feathers or gold. No, this one wears a simple white apron smeared with stains that haven't fully washed out. In his hand, a blade made not of metal, but of obsidian flakes set into a wooden handle. Think of it like a macuahuitl, but for carving meat. Your thigh is cut first. It's the most valued piece, strong, flavorful, full of ritual significance. It will go to someone important. A noble, a general, maybe even a priest who earned favor with the emperor. They cut cleanly, expertly. There's no sawing, no hacking, just short, practiced motions. The arms are next, then the calves. Your torso is split, ribs separated, organs removed and placed into clay bowls for different uses. Liver to be offered to Tilalak. Lungs to be buried near maize fields. Your stomach burned, too symbolic to consume. What's left of you is no longer a person. It's ritual matter, material for sacred consumption. And here's the twist: this isn't horrifying to the people watching. It's beautiful. To them, you're not being desecrated. You're being honored. Your flesh is transformed into communion, the bridge between the mortal world and the divine. When the priests eat your meat, they believe they are eating the god, not you. You're just the vessel. Historians still debate whether this was a symbolic transformation or a literal belief. Did people genuinely think you became the god you were sacrificed to? Or was it more like a metaphor, a kind of holy substitution? The jury's still out. You're not part of that debate, of course. You're sliced and cleaned, your pieces wrapped in maize leaves or roasted with herbs, then carried off in ceremonial dishes. And now comes the feast of the flesh. In a shaded courtyard behind the temple, under banners of turquoise and crimson, nobles gather in a circle. They recline on woven mats, sipping fermented drinks, their faces flushed with ritual intensity. The dishes arrive. Stew bowls, wrapped parcels, roasted platters. Every bite is a prayer, every chew a blessing. They eat with solemnity, slow, deliberate movements. There's no laughter here, no jokes. Only the weight of what they're doing. You've become sacred nourishment. A man lifts a piece of thigh meat from the bowl. He holds it up to the sun, murmurs a prayer in Nahuatl, then lowers it to his lips. And just like that, your body becomes part of someone else. You, the sacrificed, are reborn in flesh, not metaphorically, but quite literally. Your cells now move through a nobleman's blood. Your nutrients help fuel the priest's morning ritual. Your muscles become their breath, their walk, their fire. It's strange, isn't it? You lived your whole life preparing to die for a god, only to become part of the people who worship him. And when the feast is done, when the bowls are scraped clean and the blood is rinsed from hands and lips, no one burps. No one sighs with satisfaction. That would be inappropriate. Instead, they whisper your name, quietly, with reverence. Not the full name. That's too personal. Just your offering name. The one they gave you for this moment. The one you never chose. Let's rewind. You're back on the altar chest, open heart gone. A shell now stripped of your breath and name, and about to be sent sliding down the sacrificial chute. But before that final gravity-driven descent, there's one last detail you might have missed. Your eyes. The priest leans in. With fingers painted red and black, he closes them gently. It's not tenderness, it's tradition. No one wants to see the god's gift staring back. Because once the heart is gone, you're not supposed to be looking at anything. But what happens after the body falls, well, you've already been cleaned, carved, cooked, and served. Your heart's been placed in a Quauxicalli bowl at the feet of Huitzilopochtli's statue, steaming like a morning offering, and your bones are slowly being distributed, ribs to the bone carvers, femurs to the flute makers, and your skull. That's where things get architectural. Because while your meat was nourishment and your heart was a sunrise engine, your skull, well, it's about to become a public feature. Let's visit the Tzompantli again. This skull rack isn't a metaphor, not a poetic phrase from a dramatic historian. It's a physical structure, a sprawling wooden scaffold stretching across a section of the plaza, layered with hundreds, maybe thousands of human skulls, each one skewered horizontally on poles and spaced with grim precision. And now it's your turn to join them. Your cleaned skull is brought to the Tlaquilocque artists of a different sort. Not painters, not carvers. Specialists in preparing crania for eternal display. They start by stripping away any remaining tissue. What meat was left after boiling is scraped clean with tools carved from obsidian and deer antler. Then your skull is polished with sand and ash until it gleams like marble under sunlight. A holy light bulb socket ready for installation. Next comes the drilling. 2 holes, one on either side of the skull, carefully measured so the rod fits snug and the jaw doesn't fall off mid-exhibition. Because no one wants a floppy skull, not on this rack. Once threaded onto the rod, you're placed high up, nestled between others who, just like you, were once someone. Now you're just bone in a line of bone, smiling forever under an open sky. And here's the part that surprises even modern archaeologists. The Tzompantli was meant to impress. Not scare, not terrorize, impress. It faced the plaza. It was clean, symmetrical, almost geometric in its brutal beauty. Visitors would come to see it not with horror, but with awe. It was a testament to the city's strength, the priests' devotion, and the gods' unending hunger. Some modern estimates say a large Tzompantli could display up to 60,000 skulls, though historians still argue about that number. Was it exaggerated by conquistadors eager to paint the Aztecs as monstrous maybe? Or maybe they were telling the truth. After all, bones don't lie. And the excavations beneath Mexico City, they've found racks. Real ones, with real skulls. Yours would fit right in. Now here's where your story turns architectural. Because the Tzompantli wasn't just a display, it was part of the temple's design. There were skull towers, yes, towers built entirely of cemented human crania arranged in rings, mortared together, their faces turned outward like guardians or gargoyles. Archaeologists have unearthed several of these beneath modern streets, still grinning, still locked in formation. And yes, there's a good chance your skull or one like it ended up part of the temple's foundation. There's a fringe academic debate on whether this use of skulls was symbolic of cosmic order or merely religious utility. Did the builders believe the spirits of the sacrificed strengthened the architecture? Or were the bones just convenient construction material with extra flair? Whatever the answer, the Tzompantli was the message board of the gods, a billboard for belief. And you, dear listener, are now part of the announcement. The plaza below never sleeps. Not really. Even at night, torchlight flickers across the skull rack, giving it strange life. Shadows move through empty eye sockets. Stray dogs sniff beneath the lower beams, sensing something they can't reach. Priests pass by with incense and chants, and occasionally, a child is lifted to stare into the face of death. Your face. There's something bizarrely intimate about it. People you never met, never spoke to, now know you in the most bone-deep way. Your cheekbones, your dental imperfections, that one missing molar on display, forever. You'll never blink again, never look away. There's one moment that repeats every morning. A ray of sunlight hits the rack at dawn, casting a long skeletal shadow across the plaza stones. And for just a second, it looks like the wall is alive, stretching, moving, breathing. People say that's the gods thanking their children. Others say it's the bones remembering. Either way, you're in the lineup now. If you're lucky, a young priest might whisper a name when he walks past. Not your name. Not the one you were born with. The offering name. The one that was written in chalk beside the altar, then wiped away. But still, a name. And that's something. Because when the next victim is led up the steps and the drums start again and the Tecpotl gleams once more, they'll glance at the skull wall before they lie down. And maybe, just maybe, they'll see your empty gaze and think, that one wasn't afraid. Even if you were. They say your heart was offered to the sun. But what they don't say, at least not in the songs or carved murals, is whether you knew it was happening. You're on the altar, of course. Or were. The priests held you down. The obsidian blade struck, the crowd roared, and your heart was lifted skyward. That part is clear. What's not clear, what historians still squabble about between dusty pages and dim-lit conference halls, is whether your mind was still online when it happened. Because here's the eerie truth: modern science has suggested that the human brain may remain conscious for a few seconds after the heart stops. And a few seconds is enough to see, to know, to watch your own heart slick and red steaming in the morning light, held aloft like a relic. Let's sit with that. You're flat on your back, chest cracked open like a pomegranate. You can't move. Your limbs are locked in shock, or maybe divine paralysis. You're not breathing anymore, but for some reason your eyes still work. Your ears. that last bit of awareness like a candle burning at the bottom of a glass. The priest's face is above you, calm, focused. Lips murmuring thanks to Huitzilopochtli. You see the edge of the tekpotl still wet. You hear the drums shifting rhythm marking the climax. And then you see your heart, raised high, beating maybe not. But it moves, flexes, as if unsure whether it's done. And the crowd goes wild. Not with bloodlust, this isn't some coliseum, but with awe, reverence. They throw flowers. They chant your offering name. Somewhere down in the plaza, a child watches with huge eyes and whispers, "He looked right at me. Did you? Maybe." There are scattered Spanish accounts, unreliable but still compelling, that describe victims remaining awake after the removal. Faces contorting, eyes blinking, even lips twitching. A gasp, a murmur. It sounds impossible. But is it? One fringe theory hotly debated among modern scholars suggests the Aztec priests wanted the victim to remain conscious as long as possible. Not out of cruelty, not even ritual preference, but because they believed awareness sealed the offering. A body that didn't know it was being given wasn't really a gift. So maybe they cut in a way that avoided key nerve clusters at first. Maybe they trained their technique to perfection so that you, the honored, the doomed, could witness the glory of your own undoing. And you do. You see the sun catch your heart like a lens flare. You see blood drip from the priest's fingers and hit your cheek hot and wet. You see the obsidian bowl awaiting your final pulse. And then it all fades. Not like falling asleep, more like dropping. Your vision collapses inward. The sky folds. Sound becomes one long echo. The drums slow, not because they've changed rhythm, but because your sense of time is collapsing. And still your last thought flickers stubbornly. This is really happening. Historians often struggle with this moment, not because it isn't well recorded, but because it refuses to stay in the box labeled ritual. It's personal, human, terrifyingly real. It reminds us that beyond all the symbolism and ceremony, someone lay on that altar and felt the knife. You, and for just a few seconds, you were still there to know it. There's something cruel in that, but also strange dignity. Because for all their blood and fire and war, the Aztecs believed in the value of presence. They didn't want anonymous death. They wanted meaningful death. Eyes open, witnessed, sacralized, seen. And what greater sacrifice is there than offering yourself fully aware? When your vision finally fades, it does so not in terror, but in stillness. Not peace exactly, but inevitability. You've fulfilled your part. The gods have watched. The sun rises. And somewhere in the chants echoing down the temple walls, your name shortened, stylized, stripped of history, is sung into the wind. Not shouted, whispered. There's a modern phrase used by some anthropologists to describe this state. They call it the threshold moment, that gap between life and death, when a person becomes something else, a symbol, a memory, an offering. You lived in that gap, maybe for 3 seconds, maybe for 10. Long enough to feel the warm blood run down your ribs. Long enough to see the sky one last time. Long enough to know it was you. And then you fall body first, mind second, into the final part of the ceremony. The descent, the procession, the carving, the feast, the fire. But that single stubborn moment, that part of you that watched it happen. That might be the most horrifying truth of all, because you weren't gone when your heart left your chest. You were still there. You don't land gently. The chute smooth stone slicked by blood and polished by centuries of sacrifice funnels your lifeless body down the flank of Templo Mayor with a kind of horrifying grace. You slide fast, limbs bounce. Your skin, still painted blue, gathers dust and gravel as you tumble. And then thud. You land in a crumpled heap at the base of the temple, your limbs awkwardly splayed, eyes now definitively closed, chest a ruin of muscle and ritual. But this isn't a resting place. It's a transfer station. Because in this system, even death moves on a schedule. The priests waiting at the base move quickly. They don't look at your face, they don't need to. Your role has already been fulfilled. Your name already sung. Now you're an object of use. They lift you gently but efficiently and begin carrying you to the body chute chamber, a narrow alcove carved just behind the temple's main face. This place is off limits to commoners, sacred to the priesthood, and thick with the scent of copal sweat and something else, blood that won't come out of the stone anymore. You're not alone here. The floor is already darkened from the morning's earlier offerings. 2 other bodies lie nearby, still warm. One is a young woman, her throat painted with obsidian dye, a delicate necklace of dried flowers still clinging to her chest. The other is a boy, maybe 10, still wearing the white cotton loincloth of a temple acolyte. Their eyes are closed too. You don't get names. You don't get ceremony here. What you get is function. Attendants use reeds and ropes to lift you onto a mat. You are positioned neatly, arms pressed to your sides, legs straightened. A priest enters holding a small obsidian blade, not for the heart. That's already gone. This one's for preparation, because your body still has a role to play. But let's pull back. You're no longer seeing or feeling any of this. You've already jumped on or up or sideways depending on which scholar you ask. What's left of you is now part of a ritual engine that needs to keep turning. And part of that engine, the post-sacrifice choreography. See, the Aztecs didn't stop at the moment of death. The body was sacred long after the soul had left. And this part, the handling of remains, was just as ritualized as the cutting of the chest. One priest marks your forehead with a thumbprint of ash. Another recites a short verse in Nahuatl, invoking Tonatiuh, the sun god, to accept your sacrifice and carry your spirit into the eastern sky. And then they flip you over. The incision begins at the base of your spine along the line where your back muscles once worked hard to carry baskets or lift jugs or dance in the square. The priest slices down neatly, expertly, opening a line that ends at the base of your skull. The flesh is peeled back with care. Why? Because what comes next is practical magic. The priest needs access to your spine. Some bones, like ribs and vertebrae, are considered excellent for ritual crafting. These aren't trophies. They're tools. A rib can be carved into a ceremonial needle. A vertebra can be hollowed and used as a pipe in smoke rituals. Your body becomes a supply chest for the sacred. You didn't know you'd be so useful in death, did you? But now for the real attraction. Your skull. It's not just a decoration. It's symbolic infrastructure. Once cleaned, boiled, stripped, sanded with volcanic grit, it will be carefully drilled through at both temples. Not a crack, not a break, a drill. Precision is key. A wooden rod will pass through, and your skull will join a growing collection on the Tzompantli, the Great Skull Rack. You've heard of it. Everyone has. It's not hidden. It's the main event. Situated near the Templo Mayor's base, it faces the market plaza. Thousands of people pass by daily. Some stop and pray. Others just look. Children point. Warriors reflect. Elders nod in recognition. Your skull will be among hundreds, perhaps thousands, lining up across the wooden scaffolding, each one grinning in silent testimony to the gods' generosity or appetite. Your smile eternal now. But your placement isn't random. There's a system. Children's skulls tend to line the lower levels close to the ground, not as visible. Warriors get the center tier right at eye level. Nobles or those sacrificed during especially important festivals get the upper reaches. The sun touches them first. Guess which one you are. We'll let the priests decide. There's a lesser-known detail here, one only found in fringe Aztec records and echoed in conquistador reports. Some skulls were painted after being mounted. Bright red for those offered to Huitzilopochtli, blue for Tlaloc, yellow for Saipa Totec. The color told the story of your death. You're painted red, of course. It matches your altar. As for what happens next, it depends. Some skulls stay on the rack for years, enduring sun, rain, bird droppings, and time. Others are removed after one season and placed into ossuaries or buried beneath the temple's base. If your skull cracks or the rod begins to splinter, you'll be taken down, cleaned, and possibly reused in another form, like the foundation of a ceremonial wall. Yes, walls made of skulls. We're not being poetic here. In 2017, archaeologists unearthed one such wall beneath Mexico City, hundreds of real skulls mortared into a circular tower. And based on the evidence, they weren't enemies or criminals. They were people like you, sacrificed, revered, recycled. So let's pause. Your heart burned or buried depending on the priest's mood. Your flesh consumed by priests or nobles during sacred feasts. Your bones carved, transformed, even played as instruments. And your skull mounted, painted, sung to, forgotten, or remembered. And here's the quiet horror: the rack never empties. Because the gods never stop asking. The drums beat every morning. The temple smoke rises every noon. The priest sharpens his blade every dusk. And someone always walks those steps at dawn. Maybe your brother. Maybe your neighbor. Maybe the kid who watched you fall and thought, "I wonder how it feels." But whoever they are, they'll pass your skull on the way up. And they'll look you in the eye because you're right at their level. And in that moment, you're no longer a victim. You're a preview. Let's talk about what happens after the ceremony. When the feathers have settled, the songs have faded, and the smoke of burning hearts has curled into nothingness. You're gone. But your thigh is being served. Not just anywhere either. Your flesh is headed to the House of the Sun, a private chamber near the heart of the temple complex, accessible only to the elite. Priests, nobles, and those with spiritual clearance gather here not for gore, but for divine communion. And yes, tonight, you're the main course. There's no irony in this, no shock. It's not a scandal or an open secret. It's a ritual obligation, the consumption of flesh offered to the gods. Your flesh. It starts with a low chant. The room is dim, illuminated by flickering torches and bowls of glowing copal resin. The scent of burning herbs mingles with the unmistakable aroma of roasting meat, familiar, but never spoken of too directly. You're brought in, not whole, of course, but in parts. A dish of seared muscle wrapped in maize leaves. A broth made from your marrow stewed with chili and epazote, thickened with amaranth, the sacred grain of the empire. Everything is arranged on ceramic dishes painted with jaguar motifs and sunbursts. And it's not just for calories. The Aztecs believed that by consuming the flesh of a sacrificial victim, especially one offered to a god like Huitzilopochtli, they were literally taking in the essence of the divine. It wasn't you they were eating. It was the god you died for. Or so they said. Modern historians still debate whether ritual cannibalism was common or rare. Spanish chroniclers, especially the horrified ones, insisted it happened regularly, while some modern scholars argue it was limited to major ceremonies and symbolic portions. But then again, what's symbolic when someone's jawbone is on the stew table? Tonight the guests of honor include a high priest still stained with blood from the morning's rites, a general of the jaguar warriors wearing your femur as a sash pin, two noblewomen veiled in blue cotton whispering prayers before lifting their first bite. They begin. No knives, no forks, hands only. Each person receives a slice of thigh dipped in a sacred sauce made from chili cacao and obsidian dust. A priest leads the prayer, reminding everyone that this is not indulgence. It's not gluttony. It's thanksgiving. Each bite is accompanied by a verse in Nahuatl thanking the gods for the gift of strength, courage, and renewal. Your thigh meat is described as rich and tender, not praised for flavor but for symbolism. It's said to carry the heat of the sun and the spirit of the fifth age. You'd probably be flattered, or mortified, or both. The general chews, slowly, eyes closed. He once saw 20 of his men die in a battle with Tlaxcalan raiders. He believes eating your flesh honors their sacrifice. He believes the god is watching through the steam rising off his bowl. And maybe he is. There's a lesser-known belief, almost forgotten now, that the soul of the sacrificed watches the feast. Not in horror, not in anger, but in recognition. That your spirit circles the chamber like an eagle watching each guest receive your essence, whispering, "Yes, take me. Use me well." There's even a whispered tale among surviving Nahua elders that if someone eats a sacrifice dishonorably, without prayer or gratitude, they'll be cursed, struck down by fire or disease, consumed from within by divine rot. Tonight, no one dares to test that theory. The women eat slowly, reverently. One murmurs a prayer for her unborn child, pressing her hand to her belly after swallowing a piece of your rib meat. She believes your sacrifice will bless her womb. Another dips a tortilla into the stew made from your shoulder. She swallows and whispers your offering name. She gets it right. There's no singing, no laughter. Only the quiet sounds of chewing, breathing, and chanting. It's not dinner. It's a ceremony in the mouth. And afterward, the bones are cleaned, not thrown out, sanctified. Your femurs are scrubbed and dried, ready to be carved into musical flutes. One of your ribs is given to a priest's apprentice to wear as a token. Another is passed to a temple sculptor who'll carve a god's face into its curve and plant it in the field to bless the maize. You are everywhere now, in breath, in blood, in sound, in the soil. There's a fringe idea that has caught modern attention that the reason Aztec society was so tightly unified wasn't just fear or faith, it was integration. They didn't bury their dead and forget them. They used them, wove them into the fabric of living. You're not gone, you're repurposed. And in the corner of the temple complex, beyond the torchlight and noise, a young novice kneels beside a small fire. He holds your bone flute, newly carved, still warm from handling. He presses it to his lips and plays. The sound is high, sharp, piercing. It doesn't sound like anything else. It's not quite music. not quite breath. Somewhere between a scream and a whisper. And that, in its way, is fitting, because your voice lives on. It escapes as a note in the night wind. It dances over the lake. It slips through the reeds. And somewhere far above the city, past the moon behind the clouds, the god you fed lifts his head, hears the sound, and decides, yes, tomorrow the sun will rise. You wouldn't recognize yourself now. Not just because your body has been rendered into sacred components, eaten, burned, fluted, but because your skull is no longer yours. It has a new home, a new purpose. You've been mounted on the Tzompantli, the great skull rack of Tenochtitlan, and unlike bones buried in silence or cremated into smoke, your skull is seen. All the time. By everyone. By merchants and mothers, by children and priests, by passing warriors and visiting dignitaries from distant cities who make the journey not just to see the emperor, but to behold the bone-covered wall of cosmic accounting. This is where you end up. And you're not alone. You're mounted alongside hundreds, maybe thousands of others. The rack stretches wider than any building you ever lived in, stacked tier upon tier. It creaks in the wind. It casts a long shadow across the plaza stones. It smells faintly of ash and old wood, and whatever time smells like when it forgets your name. The sun rises over you every morning, hot and golden, and by late afternoon, your bone is almost too warm to touch. At night, moonlight catches your smooth surface, making your empty sockets shine like distant stars. And here's the thing, you're permanent now. There are no funerals, no burial rites, no mourning process, no closure. You are part of the landscape. You are a reminder not just of death, but of order. Because the Tzompantli isn't there to terrify. Not exactly. It's not some horror prop or war trophy wall. It's theological architecture. It tells the people every day we are feeding the gods, and look how many gifts we've given. You are Exhibit A. Visitors bow before the rack. Some weep. Others count aloud as if tallying the city's piety. A few whisper prayers. One man touches the lower beam and thanks you directly for the sun, for the rain, for the maize. Mainstream historians agree that the Tzompantli had a spiritual and political purpose, both a message to the gods and a message to rival cities. This is how serious we are. Fringe theories suggest the skulls were also arranged by rank or method of death. Some were painted, some burned, some adorned with carved jade teeth or obsidian inlays, a form of bone classification. You're not the only one wondering how long you'll stay here. Some skulls grow weathered with time, their surfaces pitted by sun and storm. Others vanish overnight, removed by priests for burial beneath the temple, or sealed inside the hollow spaces between sacred walls. There's evidence of this excavations in the 21st century, revealed skulls built into the very stone of the Templo Mayor, not displayed, but hidden. Structural, a sort of spiritual cement, skull bricks. So maybe one day when the wood rots or the rack collapses or you crack down the middle from sun exposure, someone will lift you off and carry you to your second death, a darker place deeper down beneath the temple's belly. But for now, you're up front, on the outer row, and people see you. A woman sells tortillas in the market every day across from the rack. She always brings 2 flowers, one for her husband and one for her brother. Both are here, she says, though she's never sure which skulls are theirs. She places the flowers anyway. A young boy once stopped in front of you and tried to imitate your expression. He stared into your sockets, puffed his cheeks, bared his teeth, then laughed. You didn't laugh back. He ran. Children are always fascinated. Some scared, some thrilled, some weirdly proud. A few whisper, "I want to be up there one day." Be careful what you wish for, because to them, the rack isn't a warning, it's a promise. If you live, well, fight bravely, die properly, you earn your spot. Not in a tomb, not in ash, but here, where the gods can see you, where your ancestors can point you out, where you become part of the city's heartbeat. And in a strange way, you do feel it. The city pulses around you. The sounds of footsteps, carts rolling water, sloshing in jugs, laughter in alleys. Every movement of life below moves around your death. It doesn't ignore you, it includes you. And then one day, something different happens. A delegation from a distant city arrives, envoys from Tlaxcala or Texcoco, here to speak with the emperor or visit the temples. They walk past the market, past the musicians and the flower sellers, and stop before the Tzompantli. They stare, not in fear, in admiration. One of them, a warrior heavily scarred, walks up to the rack and touches your skull. He says nothing, just lingers for a moment. And in that moment, you're a story. To him, you're proof of strength, of faith, of civilization itself. The Aztecs were nothing if not masters of symbolism. Every part of the empire bled meaning, and nothing bled more meaning than the bones of the sacrificed. Your skull is a testament, a foundation stone in a world built on belief, blood, and repetition. There's something both horrific and beautiful about it. You don't rot. You don't fade. You endure. Long after your name is forgotten, your face remains, staring outward, silent, smiling. Death isn't the end. Not here. Not when your blood was poured out to feed the sun and your bones are now sacred objects. Not when your skull stares across the plaza like a permanent moon. No, for someone sacrificed, death is a doorway, and what waits on the other side isn't peace or oblivion. It's duty. See, the Aztecs didn't believe in a single afterlife. You didn't go to heaven or hell. There were several destinations, and where you landed depended entirely on how you died, not how you lived. And because you were sacrificed, you've won the cosmic lottery. You're going to Tonatiuh Ilhuicatl, the House of the Sun. It's not a resting place. It's a job. Your soul rises with the dawn carried by Tonatiuh, the sun god, across the sky in his daily chariot of fire and blood. You are now one of his companions, his celestial entourage. You fight the forces of darkness that try to pull him down, fending off night with spears of light and screams made of fire. You thought the war was over. It's only just begun. The journey is divided. For 4 years, your spirit rises every morning with the sun shining down on the world, watching the people who once watched you. You hover over the fields where farmers plant maize. You glide across the lakes where children bathe. You pass over the markets, the temples, the skull rack that still holds your earthly grin. And for 4 years, you shine. After that, your spirit moves again. You transform. They say that sacrificed souls eventually become birds, beautiful ones, drenched in color and power, hummingbirds to be specific. The messengers of the sun. You zip through jungles and mountaintops, always moving, never still. The gods don't reward you with rest. They reward you with motion. You might pass a young boy picking flowers in the hills, and he'll pause and say, "Did you see that, a hummingbird?" That was someone. And maybe he's right. There's a deeper layer to all this, something rarely taught in schools or sung in songs. You are part of a cosmic engine. Aztec belief wasn't just about offering for favor, it was about balance. The world was seen as unstable, constantly on the verge of collapse, and it was sacrifice that held it together. Your death wasn't meaningless. It was essential maintenance. Modern scholars compare it to fuel. If the sun didn't receive its daily ration of blood, it would falter. Fall. The world would shatter, the fifth age would end, and the jaguars would return to devour the sky. So you, my friend, are a stabilizer, a sacred cog. And yes, that might sound mechanical, but in a world built on divine gears and celestial cycles, cogs are holy. Here's a fringe theory you might appreciate. Some believe that those sacrificed were granted fragmented souls, parts left behind in different places. Your spirit rises with the sun. Your name is buried with your heart. Your skull remains with the city. Your bones are carved into flutes and pipes and pins. You're scattered, but by design. You've become a constellation of parts, each playing a role. And that's not all. Because your presence, however fractured, doesn't just rise and fly and shine. It intervenes. Dreams. You show up in people's dreams. The priest who cut your chest open dreams of fire and feathers. The boy who watched you from the crowd sees your face in the lake. The noblewoman who ate your flesh hears your voice when she prays, whispering, "I remember you." They don't talk about it much, but they know. And deep down they believe that you're still involved, that you can still see, that maybe from your perch in the sun's entourage you're still judging them. And maybe you are. You visit your old house too. Not physically, of course, but in the rustling reeds outside, the way the wind brushes the mat where you used to sleep, the way your name lingers just long enough to make your mother pause. She whispers it once a month. Sometimes she leaves food near the threshold, not because she expects you to eat, but because she wants you to know she hasn't forgotten. There's a theory among Nahua priests that souls like yours, sacrificed, divided divine, are the ones that never fully go away. You get dreams, visions wind. Your bones become language. Your skull becomes warning. Your spirit becomes weather. And as the sun completes its arc again and again, you ride behind it, like a comet of memory, flaming in ways the living will never fully understand. Because you weren't just killed, you were transformed. And somewhere in a valley not far from your city, a poet sits beside a fire and writes a song for those like you. It goes something like, "He died with his heart in the sun, his blood in the soil, his name on the wind. He did not vanish, he multiplied." Let's clear something up. Not everyone walked up those temple stairs singing. Not everyone offered their chest to the knife with grace, dignity, or a tearful goodbye to the gods. Despite what the murals show, the smiling victims, the painted piece, not all were willing. In fact, many weren't. This part gets skipped in the polished accounts, the priestly songs, the citywide celebrations. It's not a secret exactly, it just doesn't fit the vibe. Because if sacrifice is supposed to be beautiful, meaningful, essential, then it's awkward to admit some people had to be tricked, drugged, or coerced into offering themselves. You weren't one of them, but you saw them. In that chamber near the top of the temple, the one where you waited, painted blue, given your last meal, taught the final chants, there were others. You remember one man in particular. He didn't cry. He laughed. He leaned back against the wall and said, "They say I'm a gift. What kind of gift doesn't get asked before he's wrapped?" Then he laughed again. A short barked sound, like he wanted to scare the gods. He was dead by morning. See, there was more than one kind of sacrifice. There were the willing ones like you, or at least the ones who were trained, raised, prepared, groomed for the role. Given education, praise, purification. They were part of the plan. And then there were the others, prisoners of war. That was the largest group. People captured in battle, rival warriors taken alive in flower wars, dragged back to Tenochtitlan in ropes and shame. They weren't honored. They were trophies, and they knew it. And if they didn't walk up the stairs smiling, no problem. There were herbs for that. Psychoactive plants ground into powders mixed into pulque, burned in closed chambers, to fill the air with drowsy smoke. A gentle haze would settle over the unwilling. Their fear would soften. Their limbs would go loose. And by the time the priest laid them on the altar, they wouldn't even be able to move. Fringe scholars suggest some sacrifices were so heavily drugged, they didn't even realize they'd died. Others weren't so lucky. There's an old Nahuatl word, kozcatlaka, which roughly translates to those who resist. It referred to captives who fought back, screamed, spat in the priest's face. These people weren't paraded or painted. They were handled, quietly, brutally. Sometimes the priests would offer a deal, die peacefully, and your skull will go on the rack. Fight us, and your bones will be fed to the dogs. Most chose peace. Some didn't. You saw one once. A woman, maybe 17, taken from a border village after a ritual raid. She didn't cry, didn't beg. But when they reached the top step, she turned, broke free for just a second, and tried to throw herself off the edge. She didn't make it. She was pulled back, pinned down. The sacrifice went on. But they never sang her name afterward. There's even darker talk whispered by modern researchers, avoided in polite academic papers, that some sacrifices were political, not captured, not selected by omens, just chosen. Enemies of the state, rivals to the emperor, loud voices, problematic nobles. One day they'd be arguing in court, the next they'd be blue-painted gifts to the gods. And no one asked too many questions. Because when you wrap fear in religion, it always goes down smoother. And here's the twist, most people still went along with it. Because the system worked. As long as the sun rose, the city prospered and the crops grew. Who cared if a few victims had to be encouraged? The gods didn't demand consent. They demanded blood. And everyone knew it. Still, that doesn't erase the memory of the ones who weren't ready. The boy who begged to see his mother one more time. The girl who tried to hide in the storeroom of the temple school. The foreign merchant who got caught up in a seasonal raid and found himself dressed in red cotton and handed a bone flute. They went up the same steps. They lay on the same stone. But no songs were sung for them. Not all sacrifices were about glory. Some were just about numbers. The gods didn't keep track of personality. They didn't require volunteers. They just needed hearts, preferably still warm. Historians still argue over whether the unwilling were treated with the same ritual purity as the honored ones. Were their bones used in flutes? Were their skulls given prime placement on the tzompantli? Or were they left out, dumped into pits, forgotten unnamed? The archaeological evidence is murky. Mass graves, burned remains, bone piles with no order, no pattern. Someone ends up there. Probably the ones who didn't smile. There's one more layer to this. Some victims were promised rescue. Yes, it happened. The old stories say that priests, especially the more manipulative ones, sometimes whispered to prisoners, "The gods won't take you. This is a test. If you're pure, they'll release you." And so the victims walked, climbed, lay down, only to hear the chants begin. only to feel the blade drop, only to realize too late that the test was a lie. Some say those souls never made it to the sun, that they drift through the darkness instead, whispering warnings to the ones who think being chosen is an honor. You weren't one of them, but you saw them. And deep down, even as you accepted your own death, you knew the truth. Not all who are sacrificed go willingly. But all of them go. Sometimes they call you a king, but it's a joke with teeth. Because while you may be dressed like royalty, covered in fine cotton robes, your face painted with gold dust flowers in your hair, bracelets on your wrists, you are not here to rule. You're here to die. And the people cheering for you know that. You're what the priests call a techiptla, a stand-in, an impersonator, a divine actor cast in the role of a god for one dazzling, terrible performance. And today, you're Huitzilopochtli, or Tezcatlipoca, or Quetzalcoatl, depending on the month. But whoever you are today, your fate ends the same way, with your head rolling down the temple steps. Let's rewind. The process begins months in advance. You're selected for your looks, strong features, symmetry, maybe even a certain aura. The priests say your body matches the god's form, which is another way of saying you're good casting material. You're taken into custody, not violently, not like a prisoner, but like a VIP being checked into an exclusive one-way resort. From that moment, you're treated like a living god. You're given luxurious robes and a daily feast. You're surrounded by attendants who bathe you, dress you, feed you, roasted duck and tamales shaped like stars. You don't lift a finger. You walk the city during festivals. Crowds part for you. Children wave. Adults lower their eyes. Musicians play as you pass. Flowers are thrown in your path. People kiss your feet. You smile, because you're supposed to. The city needs to believe you are the god, but you know better. You know the date is already set. At the end of your divine impersonation, usually 20 days, you'll climb the temple steps and offer your neck to the knife. Sometimes it's your heart they want. Other times it's your head. There's a particular ceremony, the Toxcatl Festival, where a man impersonating Tezcatlipoca is honored for an entire year. He's given 4 wives, fed the finest food, taught to play music and sing sacred songs. And on the final day, he walks up the temple, breaks his flutes, and dies without protest. That's the script. Some refuse to follow it. There's a story, half legend, half footnote, of a man who was chosen to embody Xipe Totec, the god who wears human skin. For weeks he performed the dances, gave blessings, endured the praise. Then on the day he was to be flayed, he laughed and spat on the high priest. They flayed him anyway, but they didn't sing the usual prayers. They didn't place his skull on the rack. They buried him in silence. The gods, they said, don't like rebellion. Fringe theories suggest some Techiptlas didn't go knowingly to their deaths at all, that the priests told them there was a test at the end, a final ritual that would transform them into true gods. Not symbolic, real. You can imagine the betrayal as the knife came down. But most didn't fight, because being a Techiptla wasn't just about death. It was about meaning. You got to be adored. You got to matter. For once, your face replaced the statue. Your words replaced the priests. For a few shining days, you became everything, and then nothing. Back to you, your turn has come. You've spent your weeks in silk and luxury and song and flattery. You've learned your lines, your dances. You've played your god well. The crowd adores you. But today, everything changes. At dawn, the priests dress you in a final robe. It's white, untouched by dye. Your face is painted with black lines, mimicking the sacred mask of your god. They give you a flute, You walk through the city streets one last time. No attendance, no music. Just you, barefoot, holding your flute, followed by silence. People watch. Some smile. Some look away. Everyone knows what day it is. As you reach the base of the temple, a priest waits. He raises his hand. You pause. You play the flute. 3 notes. That's the signal. You ascend the steps. Every footfall echoes. The air feels thinner. The city fades behind you. When you reach the top, the altar is waiting. You don't need to be told what to do. You break the flute. Then you lie down. Sometimes the Techiptla is sacrificed by heart removal. Sometimes by decapitation. Sometimes both. You won't know until the priest lifts the blade. But here's the secret: most Techiptlas don't flinch. Because the ritual depends on your composure, on your willingness. You were adored. You were worshipped. And gods, after all, don't cry when they die. They smile. As your blood runs down the altar steps, the crowd cheers, not in cruelty, but in joy, in satisfaction. You played your part. You honored the script. You ended with dignity. And for that, your skull will be displayed in the center row of the Tzompantli, painted, polished, remembered. You'll be talked about. For a while. Then another god will be chosen. Another young man will don the robe. Another flute will be handed out. And your name eventually will fade. But for a moment, just one moment, you weren't a farmer, or a soldier, or a captive. You were divine. And the knife, it was just the final line in your performance. You thought it was just warriors, didn't you? Just the strong, the rebellious, the chosen men with blood-soaked chests and open arms. But the truth, the one nobody likes to talk about, is that children died on those altars too. And women, not rarely, not accidentally, but deliberately, because the gods weren't picky. They had specific tastes. You remember one child. She couldn't have been older than 6. Hair in tight braids, face smeared with chalk white paint, wrapped in a cotton shawl with hummingbirds stitched across it. She didn't cry. Just stood still, eyes too large for her face, fingers twitching at her side. She was chosen for Tlaloc, the rain god, the bringer of life and death. And Tlaloc, he didn't want warriors. He didn't want sacrifices warmed by sun or battle. He wanted something purer, softer. He wanted children, many of them. Especially during the dry season when crops failed and clouds hovered without delivering water. In times like those, the priest said Tlaloc grew angry, hungry, and only the tears of children could summon his mercy. So they made sure the children cried. That's not poetry, it's literal. The records say the priests would induce weeping before the sacrifice. Tear ducts were essential. If a child didn't cry, the rain wouldn't come. So they'd prick fingers, show them the knife, tell them they were going to fly. One fringe account whispered in Nahua oral tradition claims a priest once smeared pepper juice near a girl's ass to force the tears out, because dry-eyed offerings meant drought. And you know what's worse, it worked. The people believed it worked. They said the skies opened right after the ceremony, that the child's scream became thunder, that the gods listened to sorrow better than joy. Tlaloc wasn't alone. Xochiquetzal, goddess of flowers and fertility, also received women and girls, particularly during flower festivals, where the air was sweet, but the altars ran red beneath the garlands. These women weren't war captives. Some were temple maidens raised from infancy within sacred compounds, taught to sing and dance and pour perfume over altars. Others were midwives chosen to honor the goddess who governed childbirth. Still others, just girls with auspicious omens, a birthmark shaped like a snake, a dream about fire, a wrong step on the wrong day. Once marked, they were removed from their families and entered the care of the priestesses, and once chosen, they were flayed. Not immediately. First came the procession, the singing, the dressing, the crown of paper flowers, and then skin peeled away. Not for cruelty, for transformation. The priests believed that by wearing the skin of the sacrificed woman, they became the goddess. For a day, maybe two. They walked the city in the flayed skin, giving blessings, receiving gifts, smiling through eye holes that weren't their own. Fringe accounts from Spanish chroniclers describe people bowing as these skin-clad priests passed, calling out "Mother Giver of Beauty." No one screamed. No one fled. It was normal. It was sacred. There was even a designated area near Templo Mayor, called the Place of the Young Bones, where children's remains were stored in carefully arranged piles, skulls grouped by age, ribs lined like sunbursts. Priests visited it during planting season, offering incense and prayers for strong rains and healthy crops. And while today's world shudders at the idea, you have to remember they didn't. They saw meaning where we see tragedy. They didn't ask, why a child? They asked, why not a child if it pleases the god? Because purity mattered. Because innocence made the blood louder. Even childbirth itself was considered a battlefield. A woman who died giving birth was treated the same as a warrior who died in combat. Her spirit went to Cihuatlampa, the place of the women of the West, where she rode beside the sun from noon to dusk, screaming and laughing and carrying light on her back. And for the women who died, not in childbirth, but by design, those sacrificed to honor the seasons, the flowers, the rain, they didn't become mourned daughters. They became deities, briefly, then bones, then songs, because the Aztecs didn't see gender as a shield from sacrifice. If anything, certain bodies were required for certain gods. The world was a puzzle. Every piece had its match. If the sun god demanded hearts, the rain god demanded tears. And if a flower god asked for a girl, you didn't say no. There's one more layer of quiet horror. Sometimes mothers gave their children willingly. You heard that right. Not out of cruelty, not because they were tricked, but because they believed giving a child was the highest gift, the ultimate prayer. These were desperate people in a dangerous world. Plagues, floods, drought, crops that failed for no reason. And if offering your child meant saving your village, you carried them to the temple yourself. The records describe mothers weeping and singing, at once clapping, as the priest carried the child up the steps, mourning and celebrating simultaneously. Modern historians have no word for that emotion. Grief and glory mixed like blood and rain. You remember the girl from earlier, the one in hummingbird cotton. You saw her skull once, years later. Lower row of the Tzompantli, still painted blue, still smiling. And even now, after your own sacrifice, after your own transformation, that smile stays with you. Not because it was joyful, but because it was required. Because even in death, she had a role to play. And so did you. They arrived in boots, with beards, crosses, steel swords, and faces that didn't know your gods. They walked into Tenochtitlan like they owned it, blinking against the brightness of obsidian and gold. They saw the canals, the floating gardens, the stone towers covered in painted serpents, and said it was like walking into a dream. And then they found the skull rack. The Spanish conquistadors weren't prepared for it. They thought they were just looking for gold, for trade routes, for a lost empire to pillage. Instead, they were greeted by a city more advanced, more ritualized, more violently devout than anything in their Christian world. And the Tzompantli, it froze them. One chronicler, Andres de Tapia, claimed there were over 130,000 skulls mounted on the racks surrounding the Great Temple. Probably exaggerated. Probably. But when you're standing in front of thousands of bleached skulls grinning in symmetrical rows, you don't pause to count. You just remember it forever. They saw priests covered in dried blood. They saw hearts still steaming in obsidian bowls. They saw the altars, the flutes carved from femurs, the god statues wearing real human skin. And they recoiled. But here's the thing, they were also fascinated. Repulsed, yes, but drawn in. Some couldn't look away. Hernán Cortés himself admitted in letters to the Spanish crown that while the rituals were barbaric, the engineering of the temples and the orderliness of the sacrificial system was remarkable, impressive even. Imagine that, kneeling in the blood of a slain victim and still finding time to admire the stonework. The contradiction was everywhere. They condemned the human sacrifice yet looted the temples. They destroyed the altars but kept the gold. They claimed to bring salvation but brought disease, war, and fire. Still, one thing terrified them above all else: how willing the people were to die. They watched victims walk up the steps without chains, without whips, even smiling, and they didn't understand. They had come from a world where God demanded repentance. This was a world where gods demanded blood. There's a fringe theory quietly circulated among modern historians that some Spanish soldiers in private began to wonder if the Aztecs were right, if the sun did require hearts, if their own presence might bring cosmic punishment for interrupting the cycle. One story claims a conquistador buried a stolen obsidian blade beneath a church altar, afraid that the god it belonged to might come for him in the night. We can't confirm that, but fear leaves its mark. The Spanish wanted to erase it all. The gods, the rituals, the songs. They burned the codices, toppled the statues, smashed the temples. And yet, they couldn't look away from the skulls. In fact, they wrote about them more than anything else. The Tzompantli appeared in dozens of letters, journals, and royal reports. Some described the stench of death. Others focused on the artistry. One compared the structure to a Roman Colosseum, except instead of seats, there were bone beams. And while they condemned the practice, they made careful notes, measurements, counts, sketches. Why? Because part of them was trying to understand. To them, human sacrifice was pagan and grotesque. But to you, it was life. Order, balance. Your death meant something. It turned chaos into structure. It gave time shape. It made the sun rise. They couldn't see that, but they couldn't deny that something worked here. The city ran on time. The seasons obeyed. The people, even in the face of horror, believed. And belief, that's what frightened them most. Because you can kill a priest. You can burn a temple. But how do you stop a worldview, especially one that says, "I would rather die with my chest open than live faithless"? Some of the Spanish believed they were witnessing hell. Others whispered that maybe they were witnessing something older, deeper. truth with blood on its teeth. You wonder sometimes what they thought when they looked up at the rack and saw your skull. Not just a bone, but a message. Not just death, but certainty. A man with a musket stares at you. His sweaty, sunburned eyes darting as if the gods might leap from the sky and drag him away. You don't blink. You never will again. Later, they'll dismantle the Tzompantli. They'll toss the skulls into pits, bury them beneath churches, grind them to dust. They'll rename the gods, reframe the rituals, rebuild the plaza with cathedrals. But some bones will remain. They always do. In 2015, beneath the streets of modern Mexico City, archaeologists uncovered the Huey Tzompantli, the great skull tower Cortez himself mentioned. More than 600 human skulls mortared into a massive cylindrical structure. Yours might have been among them. Still there, still grinning, still watching. They tried to silence the drums, but they're still beating. In textbooks, in museums, in the bones beneath the concrete. You can feel them, can't you? Dumb, dumb, dumb. Like a heartbeat, like memory, like something not finished yet. And now we're here. The city is quiet again. The drums have gone still. The last torch sputters out beside the temple, casting long shadows that stretch and waver, then finally vanish into the stone. The plaza is empty, save for dust and petals and a few lingering footprints near the base of the altar. And your story. It lingers not because of what you were, but because of what you became. You were never just a person. Not to them. Not to the priests, the city, the gods. You were a vessel, a bridge, a transaction. You were blood turned into calendar time, a body converted into rain, sunlight, war, victory, agricultural yield, cosmic alignment. And yet, you remember things. You remember your name, though no one speaks it anymore. You remember your mother's voice calling you in from the water. The way your father smoothed your hair with a calloused hand. You remember the warmth of the sun on your back as you worked the soil. The smell of corn roasting. The first time you laughed so hard, you cried. You remember being human. That part didn't disappear with your heart. It went somewhere. It hid in the pieces they left behind your skull on the rack, your thigh served in stew. Your breath turned to music through a flute carved from your own femur. Because that's the strange horror of it all. You never really left. You became architecture, symphony, harvest myth. You became the proof of faith. A tale mothers told their children to make them understand how the sun kept rising. A whisper in the wind that slipped between rows of maize. You've been here ever since, and now the modern world stumbles over your bones. They excavate carefully, brushing dust from skulls that smile too widely. They catalog you, label you, give you numeric codes and Ziploc bags. They try to guess your age, your diet, the exact arc of the blade that opened your chest. They call you Specimen 4238A. They don't know your name, but they feel something. Because even under fluorescent museum lights, even through glass cases and carbon dating reports, you radiate something ancient, something deeper than history. Intention. You didn't just die. You were meant to die. And in that meaning, you became part of something terrifyingly grand. You wonder, was it worth it? Was the sun brighter for your blood? Did the crops grow better? Did a child survive a fever because the gods smiled down hearts full and satisfied? You'll never know, but it doesn't matter. Because belief doesn't care about proof. It only cares that someone gave everything. And you did. and now you are everywhere. Your story slips into textbooks, lectures, nighttime podcasts like this one. It appears in dreams, in echoes of drums, in the sudden silence of cities that once pulsed with ritual and smoke and music made from bone. You are more than a skull. You are the reason the sun came up. And tomorrow, someone else will climb the steps. But tonight, under the stars, let's slow down. Let's sit for a moment on the edge of the temple steps where the stone is still warm. Let's listen to the wind moving across the plaza, gentle, now softer than it was during the festivals. The incense has burned away. The crowds have gone home. You're still here, still watching, still remembered. Because when a life ends in purpose, no matter how grim the silence that follows is never empty. It hums, it lingers, it becomes legend. And that legend becomes you. So now let your breath soften. Let your shoulders settle. The drums are gone. The torches are out. There's only the hush of wind and the memory of footsteps on stone long faded, but never quite erased. You've traveled through something dark tonight, not in search of nightmares, but in search of understanding. You've seen what it means to be chosen not for reward or riches, but for sacrifice. You've watched the blade rise. You've felt the weight of history pressed like a warm palm on your chest. But that weight, it doesn't need to follow you to sleep. Leave the altar behind. Step away from the skull rack. Let the city of Tenochtitlan fade gently into mist. Let the gods go quiet. Your heart, your real heart, beats safe inside your chest. Whole, uncut, entirely your own. You don't need to be an offering. You've already listened. That's enough. So take one last breath, deep and slow. Let your spine melt into the mattress. Let the edges of the story blur like smoke in dusk light. Let the final drumbeat echo once, then fade. And when you close your eyes, know this, you made it. You walked the temple steps and came back. And now, it's time to rest. Good night.